G'day folks, it's Rob here, and in today's video we're going to go through the 5 steps I like to use to grow ourselves a load of ginger. Not only that, I'm going to show you the ginger we grew this season being planted out and also its harvest, which we'll get to after I natter on a bit about how to grow your own ginger. So the first step we're going to look at is positioning your ginger to make the most of the sun in your climate. So ginger is a tropical plant, and I know folks in the tropics that grow it 12 months a year and just harvest the bits as they need it. Us here, even down in the subtropics, as you can see behind me here, our ginger does tend to die off a bit. That's a little bit of Cambodian pond ginger on the grow there. So it really does like a nice hot climate to grow in. Pretty much all zone 9 or 10 in the States. Here in Australia, the hot temperates all the way through to the tropics, you can grow a decent amount of ginger every summer season. So the best time to plant the ginger out is in at the start of spring, when the temperature is over 25 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit. You folks in cooler areas could start off your ginger rhizome in a warm spot inside or in a greenhouse, and once things start to warm up outside, you can pot them out. It'll give you just that nice little head start that might mean a couple of extra 100 grams come harvest time. So where we are in the subtropics, we can have some scorching summer days, 40 degrees, which is 104 plus through summer, and I've found that direct sunlight on days like that tend to really knock the ginger about. So I like to plant my ginger in a little bit of a shady position. This year I took advantage of the shade cover over the top of the hoop house for the aquaponics, just to give it a bit of relief from the hot afternoon sun. In other cooler areas, you might be able to get away with growing it in full sun. I would still recommend that it be planted in a position that gets shaded from the harsh afternoon sun. One thing to consider if you are in a cooler region is to locate it, if you're in the southern hemisphere, in a northerly facing aspect, and if you're in the northern hemisphere, you plant the ginger out in a southerly facing aspect, so you can make the most of the late summer sun as it becomes lower in the sky. Now, for you folks who do live in cooler areas, grow in containers. Ginger will grow fantastically well in containers, as we've found. You've also got the added benefit that you can pick them up and move them around the yard and chase the sun through the season as things start to cool down. Not only that, because the ginger root is so close to the outside of the container, that sun will help keep the soil nice and warm, which the ginger will love. Speaking of soil, that leads us on to step number 2, preparing the soil for your crop. Now, ginger likes a fairly low pH between about 5 and 6.5, and also likes a nice loose soil blend so the roots can expand, and also free draining because it doesn't like a lot of water around the roots in soil. Now, one way you can get around that and loosen the soil up a bit is to add loads of organic matter. You can add bag compost, your own compost, all that in there will loosen up the soil. That organic matter will suck in moisture like a bit of a sponge and release it when the plants require it as the soil dries out. Not only that, as it's decomposed or broken down by the bacteria, the compost worms and the earthworms in the soil, they will release nutrients that your plants can take up. So on to step number 3, which is rhizome selection. Now, we're really lucky here because we have such a long growing season. I can take ginger we're going to harvest this afternoon, I can pop it in my pantry, and then in about 6 to 8 weeks time I can pull it out again and plant it, and away we go. For you folks who aren't lucky enough to have some ginger on hand, I would suggest you buy some ginger from either a plant supplier online or source your ginger root from the organic section of the supermarket or your grocery store. The reason being is ginger is one crop some people will spray with a sprouting inhibitor so it has a longer shelf life. So it's a good idea to buy from the organic section in that respect. As for the size, well, this bit here is around about 50 grams or about 1 3/4 ounces. Is 7.5 centimeters long or 3 inches long, roughly around about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches wide. Has a nice bit of weight to it. It's just over 50 grams actually, and I think it's a fantastic little bit of root ginger. You want them nice and plump and fresh looking because there's going to be a lot of energy in there that it can provide the shoots as they sprout and take off. In the past, I've planted out really small sections, bits like this, just this end knob here, and I've found that they tend to rot away and the plants really don't get off to a great start. So a nice big section like this will really help you along. If you do end up buying a larger section of ginger, you can break off little pieces, let the wounds heal over for a couple of days just till it forms a bit of a dry scab over it, and then plant it out. The reason being is I have snapped ginger fresh and planted it out, nice big healthy sections. Something's got in there and it's just rotted off, so I would suggest that you let the ginger heal over before you plant it out. So step number 4 is planting out the ginger rhizome itself. It's pretty easy to do. What I like to do is spread them out round about 20 centimeters apart from each other, which is roughly 8 inches. And then it's as easy as just pushing them down just about 1 inch to 2 inches, or 2.5 to 5 centimeters deep below the soil surface. And that's pretty much well it. From there, because the soil's already been fed up nicely, I like to just cover it over with a nice layer of mulch. Mulch has actually got a number of benefits. Firstly, it helps suppress any weeds that will be in competition with the ginger. Secondly, it helps keeps the surface nice and moist so it retains moisture. And thirdly, because it's organic matter, as it breaks down, as the bacteria and compost worms feed on it, it's releasing more nutrients to help feed your ginger plants. As for how long it takes to grow a crop of ginger, for us in the subtropics, it's a 9 to 10 month crop. But you folks in cooler areas may only get a good 5 to 8 months, depending on how cold your climate gets. As for when to harvest the ginger, you can start to bandicoot or fossick around and pick out the baby pink ginger after the sections are a few months old. I suggest you wait until the plant has 4 or more strong growing stalks on it before you do so, or you might rob it of a bit too much energy. Now I prefer the spicier, more mature rhizomes, so I start to pull out the main crop that I want to store when I start to see the majority of the leaves starting to yellow off. Now, due to our climate, we're also lucky enough that we can let some of our plants overwinter in warm spots in the garden. That basically means letting them stay in the soil until they sprout next season. You folks in cooler areas may not be a good idea if your ground freezes over, as the ginger may rot. Now on to step number 5, which is maintenance through the season. Obviously we need to water the plants. My rule of thumb with that is actually a rule of finger. I just like to dip my finger into the surface of the soil. If it's cool and moist, I pretty much will leave it. If it's starting to feel a little bit dry, I give the bed a nice drink of water. It's as easy as that. As far as feeding goes, I like to give them a bit of a feed once the plants are about a foot or 30 centimeters high. Just pull back the mulch, pile on some compost and replace the mulch. And again, pretty much well towards mid to late summer, I give them another feed because we have such a long growing season here, and that pretty much will see them through to harvest. Now this season though, I haven't had a lot of compost on hand, so I've been using a fish emulsion fertilizer. About every 6 to 8 weeks I've been giving them a watering can full of that, and they seem to have responded really well. They put on loads of growth. So there's your 5 steps folks, but just to show you how easy it is to grow your own ginger, I suppose the proof is in the pudding as some people say, we'll spin the camera around and give you a look at the harvest. Now the ginger in this root pouch garden was planted out in 2 lots. 3 were planted out in August of last year, and another 6 were planted out in September, the start of our spring, making for 9 rhizomes all up. So here we go folks, I've got my basket, pop the ginger in. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at the back here and try and gingerly pull these guys out. And by the way, you can see the mulch here that I added when these guys have gone in. It's pretty much all broken right down and fed up the soil. Oh, look at that. That's a nice little bit of ginger there. Should clean up nice. So I just found the mother for this piece and it just snapped off there, and it's looking, you know, pretty good compared with the piece that went in 9 to 10 months ago. And this was the second plant we planted out. There you go, look at that. That's a beautiful bit of ginger there. And that's the mother section just there again. So when you are digging them out, it is a good idea to not put the fork down in the middle of the clump, move it to one side and then leave her underneath the whole section. You will get bits that break off, like this little section here from this plant, but that's sort of inevitable. Now this one, but look at that. That's a beautiful piece of ginger there, all from one plant. This basket's not going to manage, I don't think. So there we go. This is the last of the ginger, the last plant from this bed here. Not a bad looking piece, if I do say so myself. Awesome. I've given the ginger a bit of a hose. As you can see, got some fairly nice clean looking roots here, and just taking off all these large roots and just dropping them back in the bed here where they can break down and feed up the soil. So one thing I did want to show you though, on some of these root sections you get these little nodules. Now what these are is an energy store for the plant. They're a good thing to find. It means your plant is doing really well, and it's looking at somewhere else to store some energy in case times go bad. So just thought I'd point that out for you folks who are concerned. And I think we're pretty much all there. On to the last piece, and we'll give them one more quick clean down before we weigh them up. There we go. So I've washed all the ginger and now it's time to weigh it up. First of all though, I want to just zero off some scales here. 0. Then we'll pop on the milk crate. So this is our harvest. I have a milk crate worth of ginger from 9 plants. So this is going to be a bit of a balancing act, but I'm sure I can do it. Pop this in here and hopefully I won't bump the camera or be too shaky. Lift her up. It might take a while for it to register, but there we go, 9.58, we'll call it 9.5 kilograms. A very nice harvest indeed. So there were 9 gingers all up, so we've got just over a kilo, a smidge over a kilogram from every plant in here. So that's pretty much all smack bang on the average for this crop. So I'm stoked, I'm absolutely stoked with what we've got here. So here we go folks, this is the ginger harvest. And as you saw, there was about 9 kilos, just over 9 kilos for 9 plants. So that's roughly 1 kilogram per plant. It's a bit hard to wrangle all these guys at the moment, and I dropped a bit off down the back. So I'm really stoked with how well this harvest has gone. And it is because I followed those 5 basic steps: positioning the plants in the right spot, preparing the soil to begin with, then going through and selecting the right rhizome and planting them the right distance apart, and then feeding them and fertilizing them regularly through the growing period. So a fantastic yield. A few folks who are going to ask me, how are you going to, look after all this ginger? How are you going to eat it and store it? Well, we've got a clip that goes through a few different ways you can process your ginger to prolong its shelf life, so to speak, or fridge life. So you can check that out up there in that little clip there. Runs through a few different methods, plus a lot of this, we'll be giving away to family and friends. I've also selected a couple of choice bits of this ginger as well that we'll be saving in the pantry, and then after we finish renovating, I'll be planting them out in the patch once we know where the garden's going, and they will be next year's crop. Before I go, I really do need to thank you folks for coming along and watching our videos and showing your support by giving us a thumbs up and leaving a comment down in the comment section below. And I also need to thank those marvelous folks over on Patreon who are continuing to support our channel here on YouTube and also the building of the new website. So thank you very much folks. There's a couple of people that go above and beyond, the super contributors. You can find links to their websites and Facebook pages down in the description below, and I'd really appreciate it if you pop on down there, go over and see what they're about and show them some love. I will leave it there though. This is pretty much all the end of Ginger Harvest 2018. I do hope you enjoyed the growing pointers as well, and I will catch you next clip. Cheers all, have a top one.